Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Govinda Radha Govinda Shri Radhe Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada ki, Grantarat Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jai Go Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 15, entitled The Pandavas Retire Timely. And today we are looking at text number 18. So 1:15:18. Narman yudhara ruchira smita shobhitani Narman yudhara ruchira smita shobhitani He parta he arjuna sake kuru nandaneti He Partha he Arjuna Sakhe Kuru Nandaneti Sanjalpitani Naradeva Ridhi Sprishani Sanjalpitani Naradeva Ridhi Sprishani Smarturlutanti hridayam mama madhavasya Smarturlutanti hridayam mama madhavasya Narman yudara ruchira smita shobhitani He Partha he Arjuna Sakhe Kuru Nandaneti Sanjalpitani Naradeva Ridhi Sprishani Smartulutanti hridayam mama madhavasya Nirmani Conversation in jugs Udhara Talk very friendly Ruchira Pleasing Smita Shobhitani Decorated with a smiling face Hey, note of address. Partha, O son of Pritha. Hey, note of address. Arjuna, Arjuna. Sake, friend. Kuru Nandana, son of the Kuru dynasty, iti, and so on. Sanjalpitani, such conversation. Naradeva, O king. Hridi, heart. Sprishani, touching. Smartu, by remembering them. Lutanti, overwhelms. Hridayam, heart and soul. Mama, my. Madhavasya, of Madhava, Krishna. Translation. O king, his jokings and frank talks were pleasing and beautifully decorated with smiles. His addresses unto me as O son of Pritha, O friend, O son of the Kuru dynasty, and all such heartiness are now remembered by me, and thus I am overwhelmed. Text 19. Generally, both of us used to live together and sleep, sit and loiter together. And at the time of advertising oneself for acts of chivalry, sometimes if there were any irregularity, I used to reproach him by saying, "My friend, you are very truthful." Even in those hours when his value was minimized, he, being the Supreme Soul, used to tolerate all those utterings of mine, excusing me exactly as a true friend excuses his true friend, or a father excuses his son. Purport. Since the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna is all perfect, his transcendental pastimes with his pure devotees never lack anything in respect, either as a friend, son, or lover. The Lord relishes the reproaches of his friends, parents, and fiancés more than the Vedic hymns offered to him by great learned scholars and religionists in an official fashion. Text 20. O Emperor, now I am separated from my friend and dearmost well-wisher, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore my heart appears to be void of everything. In his absence I have been defeated by a number of infidel cowherd men, while I was guarding the bodies of all the wives of Krishna. Purport. The important point in this verse is how it was possible that Arjuna could be defeated by a gang of ignoble cowherd men, and how such mundane cowherd men could touch the bodies of the wives of Lord Krishna, who were under the protection of Arjuna. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has justified the contradiction by research in the Vishnu Purana and the Brahma Purana. In these Puranas it is said that once the fair denizens of heaven pleased Ashtavakra Muni by their service and were blessed by the Muni to have the Supreme Lord as their husband. Ashtavakra Muni was curved in 8 joints of his body, and thus he used to move in a peculiar curved manner. The daughters of the demigods could not check their laughter upon seeing the movements of this Muni, and the Muni, being angry at them, cursed them that they would be kidnapped by rogues, even if they would get the Lord as their husband. Later on, the girls again satisfied the Muni by their prayers, and the Muni blessed them that they would regain their husband even after being robbed by the rogues. So, in order to keep the words of the great Muni, the Lord himself kidnapped his wives from the protection of Arjuna. Otherwise, they would have at once vanished from the scene as soon as they were touched by the rogues. Besides that, some of the gopis who prayed to become wives of the Lord returned to their respective positions after their desire was fulfilled. After the departure of Lord Krishna, he wanted all his entourage back to Godhead, and they were called back under different conditions only. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Mena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitangscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavanishvare Vrishabhanu Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanshakalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shrivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. O Emperor, now I am separated from my friend and dear most well-wisher, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore my heart appears to be void of everything. In his absence I have been defeated by a number of infidel coward men while I was guarding the bodies of all the wives of Krishna. After Krishna's disappearance, he had a big family. As we know, in Dwarka, Krishna had built a city for himself there, a very big one, and there he had married 16,108 queens. He built a palace for each of them, and it's quite an astounding city, but at Krishna's departure, it is very interesting if we read about that part of Krishna's Leela where he then retracted himself, but then also all his different associates, because it is explained that they were too powerful. They were too powerful to be living here on earth, and the time had come for all of them to make their departure. And Krishna then arranged in various ways for them to disappear. We see that at the end, Krishna's family itself, they disappeared due to the curse that was given to Krishna's grandson, Samba. So once the boys, the princes, they had played a trick on the munis, on the sages. They took an iron bowl, they covered it over, and they dressed Samba as a woman. And they asked the rishis, what will be the gender of this child? Will it be a boy or a girl? As a joke. But the rishis were not impressed. And then they cursed them to say that, well, what he will deliver is he will deliver that which will destroy the entire Yadu dynasty. So it was very shocking when they heard that prediction. And then they ran back to the assembly and they explained what had happened to the king. At that time everybody was sitting in the assembly hall and the kids rushed in and they explained what happened. And what they did is they took that iron bowl and they ground it down into a fine powder, as fine as possible. And they threw it all over, they threw it in the ocean. But there was a little piece left, like if you grate cheese. You know, if you grate cheese, you grate it, and then at the end it's like that little piece left that you cannot really grate because you have to hold on to it. So there was that little piece of iron left, a little larger than the rest, and that they also threw into the ocean. Now, what happened is that iron, then, because Dwarka, if you know, it is on the ocean, so that iron then, it spread to a certain area in the water, and then it got absorbed by the reeds, by the plants growing on the sides, at a place called Prabhas Kshetra. And then later, Krishna's family, they went to Prabhas Kshetra to perform a religious ceremony, and they were all there. And part of the ceremony, they drank wine made of rice. So Kshatriyas, they sometimes do that. So then there was some intoxication, sake. There was some intoxication there, and then somehow there was some disagreement between two members of his family, and then a great fight broke out, and it just somehow escalated, and then they plucked these reeds that grew at the side of the ocean, plucked at the side of the river. They plucked it out, but it had been basically turned into iron rods because of all the iron that was absorbed into them. And then they all beat one another to death. So, very interesting end to the whole experience. And then Krishna also, he left. We see that just before he left, he had a whole discussion with Uddhava and Maitreya Muni, where he was also present. But then, after Krishna's departure, Arjuna then he went to Dwarka in an attempt to help rescue Krishna's queens, because you can imagine all the Yadus had disappeared now, Krishna had disappeared, and it was only the queens who were left in the city. So he had them all, and he tried to take them back to Hastinapur. And then on the way, he was robbed by a group of, as Prabhupada says there, ignoble coward men. So not warriors, not like an army. It was just a group of rogues, of thieves, who then robbed Arjuna and who stole these women. And Arjuna, he couldn't do anything, somehow or other. He was rendered powerless. So this same person who had, fought with the demigods and killed millions of people in the world's greatest war, at the end he was defeated by a group of ignoble coward men. And he lost Krishna's queens. They were kidnapped. So wow, what a now we know here that obviously, like with all Krishna's pastimes, there's the superficial layer of the experience, or the external part of it, and then there's also the internal part. So we see here, there was Astavakra Muni. So Ashtavakra means bent in 8 places. So bent in 8 places. He was a great sage, but somehow these sages, they can become a little volatile at times. So because he was laughed at by these daughters, he cursed them. And then his curse later took effect. But as you see, it was ultimately actually Krishna himself who kidnapped the queens in the form of these coward men. So in that way, it still was okay, even though it looked like such a shocking thing happened. But behind it, the Lord's arrangement was still there, and it was all part of his final lesson. Krishna ultimately appears on earth to show us how to live, and to show us how to die, to show us how the material world really works. So it is explained that in one purport we see, we go through the whole Bhagavatam, Krishna's whole life is explained there. And a big part of Krishna's teachings is that he also teaches how one should be unattached from material life and what happens in material life. And then he himself sets the example by also destroying his whole family dynasty, to show that at the end everything has to disappear and one has to somehow make peace with that. And even with his great devotees like Arjuna, there's also part of their experience in life that their power had been taken away, and in that way also their love for Krishna actually becomes accentuated even at that point, because we see that their attachment is really to Krishna's desire and not towards the opulences and the power that comes from becoming one of Krishna's devotees. So we understand that there's a difference between the opulence and power that comes in devotional service and that which comes through other means. Because the devotee, he is aware that it is fully dependent on Krishna's mercy, and then at any time it can be retracted. And that he also understands his desire or his happiness is ultimately not dependent on these opulences, but is dependent on being willing to execute Krishna's desire. So, very interesting how Krishna then also manifests this within the life of someone like Arjuna. So at the end, he just got robbed by some coward men. But then we see Arjuna's glory is that he all took it as Krishna's mercy. He was not shocked at the loss of his abilities. he was completely aware that somehow now Krishna had retracted his power, and now his true position is shown. But his attachment to Krishna was not at all affected by it. So that then is the other glory of the glory of the pure devotees, is that they can somehow digest whatever is thrown at them by life. They can take it and not be disturbed by it. So that's also tricky. I remember one devotee, I think he was saying how sometimes he becomes very angry with Krishna, and he would go to the deities and he would tell them that, it's like, please, you can't push me too much, I'm not a strong devotee. So it was interesting, he was having this, sometimes he gets very angry and things become very difficult. But then he still prays to the Lord, he still understands that Krishna is behind it. And it's interesting to see how the devotee's attachment, the devotee's full understanding that everything is happening by Krishna's will, even though sometimes things can become difficult, it doesn't diminish his attachment to Krishna or his faith that ultimately whatever happens is by Krishna's desire, and then therefore it must be good. But at the same time, it's not always easy. It is not always easy to accept it. Okay, so let's hear any questions or any comments on this verse.
What happened with Balaram though? I mean, that on the Kshetra, actually, I think Krishna and Brahma also took part in it and kind of smashed it.
They were there, yeah. They were part of the whole thing. But I don't know, yeah, Balaram's demise, or like how Balaram disappeared, that is an interesting question. Let's see. Because I was thinking about the same thing. Okay. Yeah, he also did the same as Krishna. He was, after the war, and after that final battle, and after Krishna disappeared also, he left after Krishna, he also sat down in a meditative state, and he also disappeared. And then that's where it happens that some scriptures describe that a great white snake left the mouth of Balaram in reference to his identity as Anantashesh. And he departed close to the Somnath temple in Gujarat. So there's still a cave there that one can go to that marks the disappearance place of Lord Balaram. So yeah, what interesting, the whole Maushalya Liva, very mysterious part of Krishna's pastimes. And we also remember, just to finish the story, that piece of iron that when they filed down the bowl, that piece of iron was swallowed by a fish, and then that fish was caught by a Jara. Is it? Yeah, I think so. And then he found that piece of iron in the stomach of the fish. And then with that piece of iron, he created an arrowhead. And it is that arrowhead that he later shot Krishna with. But he shot Krishna in the, where he shot him? In the heel, yeah. So he shot him in the heel. And then Krishna left from that. So it's interesting that it's explained that Krishna arranged it in such a way that his existence could still be doubted by the atheists. But at the same time, who dies from getting shot in the heel? Yeah, Achilles, yeah, very similar. So that's how we see how Krishna made his departure. But it's a mysterious part of the pastimes, and it's not like discussed extensively how the whole thing happened, because also the devotees don't really like to hear about it that much, but still, it's part of Krishna's pastime and it was there for a reason.
Like, we never celebrate Krishna's disappearance.
Yeah, we don't celebrate Krishna's disappearance day.
It's not celebrated.
Yeah.
It's like we celebrate appearance and disappearance days of acharyas,
Yeah.
but not of Krishna.
Not of Krishna. That's interesting.
Was this interesting part when these cowherd men, and then they called
The
road.
rest is like normal peasants in one sense. But somehow they were like criminals also brandishing weapons. So then they just jumped them. So it must have been quite a humiliating experience. I'm also not sure. I think Arjuna must have been alone at that time. Must have just been just him and the queens, and he just couldn't somehow protect them.
These queens, they were also like before gopis, and then when Krishna left, his government just took them back or something?
Yeah, well, there's all these pastimes. There are layers and layers that would be by different acharyas that reveal certain levels of what happens. So I didn't do my research today, so I couldn't. I'm not so aware of what happened later. And but it could well be that who knows where they went. But as Krishna says here, that it obviously was not. If a normal mortal would have tried to kidnap them, they would have just simply disappeared, because they couldn't be touched by anyone except Krishna. That's what Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur points out. Okay.
And then those that fell down at Brahmachari, all the Yadus,
Yes.
so they were all demigods that just returned to their positions, right?
Yes. Yeah.
They did not go to the spiritual world,
They went back to their positions, yes. So Krishna's pastimes were, Krishna's family and his entourage was composed of two groups of beings. So those his eternal spiritual associates that appeared with him, and then also demigods who was requested to take birth in the Yadu dynasty in order to help fulfill the mission of annihilating the demons. So at Prabhas Kshetra, it is those demigods, they all slaughtered one another, and then they just returned to their post as demigods. But then Krishna's eternal associates, they disappeared, huh? That's how it goes? We have to see.
and again, that we can remember, for example, Bhishma. So Bhishma was one of the Vasus. Okay?
Yes.
So did he return as a Vasu, or did he go to the spiritual world after being
No,
interacted with Krishna?
Well,
And getting such...
it seems like they went back to their post as demigods, some of them, and then after that they would return back to the spiritual world. Because in one sense, it was still part of their, they took birth, they voluntarily just appeared in a human form, but they still had their identity as demigods that they were fulfilling.
But when they go back as a demigods, don't they have to take another birth as demigods, or how does that work? Or they're just like an avatar?
It's more like it does seem to be. It's like that.
They go and they go in the same...
Yeah, it seems like it seems like they can just step down into the human form and have their experience, and then go back into whatever they were before. Just like taking on a limited role and then go back. Because we see that it happens, the demigods can, it's like they can appear on earth in a human form, but it's still part of their demigod life. And it's not like they now take birth again. And that's what it seems like, because they all just return back to their post. They just go back. Like, even in Krishna's Leela, there's, for example, what's that king that he also liberates? I think King Nriga. Is it not King Nriga? Well, there's a few times there's like that Gandharva, there's these godly beings that were somehow cursed, and then Krishna liberates them, and then they just go back to whatever their position was before they were cursed. So it does seem to be like it works like that also. Not like for us where you have to take a birth again and then have a new identity. They just go back to whatever identity they had before. And then that runs through the course.
So like for them it's just like, this is like a simulation or something.
Yeah.
This experience, but it's interesting, when they go in these forms, do they completely also, do they still remember that they are demigods, or how do they...
That's an interesting question. I think it would differ. I'm not sure. Like you see Bhishma, for example, he never gives a reference that he is aware that he's one of the Vasus. He never speaks from that platform or ever makes reference to it. So it's not clear to what an extent they would know exactly who they are and where they come from. I don't know. Vidura knew, so you can see quite a few people knew about Vidura, because you even see it in the third canto when Vidura meets Maitreya. then Maitreya directly says, that you are Yamaraj.
But okay, then the question is, with the Vidura, it's interesting. At the same time as Vidura was here, Pandavas met Yamaraj at that lake.
Yeah.
So how did that happen? Was that another Yamaraj or with like the same?
Yeah, that is an interesting question. So, I've heard it explained that,
Other demigods were there, right? Also other demigods, they took part. So, and at the same time, you said these demigods, they took birth here, but at the same time, we all see these.
they're still there. Yeah.
Still there, they're functioning.
That is the mystery. We have to do some research on that. Otherwise, I'm just speculating. Okay, anything else? Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaura Premanande.